Mount Hope Church, we love you. Thank you so much for tuning in to the after party. Man, we are quarantined but still connected, and we're going to have a great conversation today around Pastor Kevin's message and this series, Hope in Uncertain Times. I'm here with Katy Ganser and Jordan Townsend. Katy and Jordan, I'm so excited that you guys are here. This morning was amazing. What was your favorite part of Pastor's message? What moved your heart? What was your biggest takeaway? Jordan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I liked when he was talking about, when PK was talking about carrying the weights, and I just had this idea, like, that you really are formed by whatever you choose to carry. In both the positive and the negative, just that idea, like in the positive, we were meant to carry the things of the kingdom, you know, carrying those promises of God, and those form how we react to everything around us. But just in the negative sense, like in those terms of stress and like when there's struggle going on around us, like when you carry things of struggle, they form you, you know, and I think some of us have a high capacity for things that we were never meant to carry, you know, and I feel like the Lord's just calling me through that, like, learn to carry the things you were born to carry.
Yeah, that's really good. Katy, what about you? Biggest takeaway from this morning?
Yeah, it's somewhere in the middle of what Jordan's saying, too. I think when he's talking about, being certain of some things, again, getting back to the word of what it says and what Jesus is meant to carry and not us.
Yeah.
I think knowing our value is super important too. When he was just hitting on our value, if he cares about the birds in the sky and the flowers, how much more us. So getting on our hands and knees and letting that stuff roll off. That really spoke to me.
Yeah, that's super good. My favorite point from this morning was just the fact that he said worry won't change anything, but it will change you. Because I was like, that is the moment I'm ready to give an offering right now. Like that point right there is so relevant even to the most seasoned believer, because, even though we know that, we tend to forget it when we're in pressure situations, when we're in difficult moments. We tend to think that our worry could change anything. And the truth is that it's not going to change anything around you, but it will, in fact, change you. And I love the specific examples that he gave. Can you talk to us really quickly maybe about a moment that you were in that caused a lot of anxiety, or when you were in a moment of worry, what did you do to tame your anxiety or to manage your anxiety? Because I think as Christians, it doesn't matter if you started today at the end of the prayer or if you've been doing this for 20 years, worry is a reality for a lot of us, especially in this time. What would you say?
That's so good. Actually, last night, my roommates and I were sitting around. I started talking to them about some stuff that really was like giving me some anxiety. And I just realized in that moment, all that energy I was putting towards anxiety and worry needed to be redirected productively. Yeah. And so I'm spending all this time worrying and focusing and like putting my attention on this one very thing, that's bothering me. And I had to see beyond that, and I think for me too, in this season, like my nose has been like in the word, like really, like I have just been like, oh my gosh, like I have to get myself in the word and out of like I could go to everything, I could go to the news, I could go to Facebook and Instagram and get locked into all of that stuff, and it can make me really anxious. I'm like, or I could spend all of that energy and all of that time in a very productive place.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's really helpful. What would you say, Jordan?
Yeah. A little while back, my dad was pretty sick with some stuff, and my parents have both been really healthy their whole life, so it was pretty, jarring for me. I remember just feeling kind of this overwhelming sense of anxiety, how's this going to work out, which was unusual for me because I've just never experienced that to that level. But there were two things, one practical, one spiritual, that I felt like were really, really helpful with that. And the first thing was that I recognized that it's really unhealthy to identify with things quickly. Like being careful of what you identify with is huge in life, and I think that it's really easy to identify with things that are actually attacks from the devil. You know what I mean? I'm just an anxious person, or you know what I mean? I suffer from anxiety, and I don't mean to downplay that or say that you have to live in denial, when you're going through things, but I would be slow, and that's been the key in my life. I have been slow to identify with that and be like, I'm just anxious. Right. What you name does play some power over your life and have some power in your life. So I'm slow to identify with those things, and I'm never going to let an attack of the devil define my character or my identity, Right. And I think that that's hugely important. So that's the practical side. Be careful what you do speak over yourself. Be intentional about those things. And then spiritually, like you've been teaching me this, just looking for every opportunity to offer things to the Lord. Like your struggle is an opportunity for an offering.
Yeah.
If you'll look at the Lord and say like, God, I'm seeing this as an opportunity to offer this thing over to you. Like in the Old Testament, when they offered things to the Lord, they were burned up on the altar and then blessing poured out in its place. And I think that if we'll look at anxious moments and like trial times as offerings to put on the altar, we can recognize that God will burn those things out of our life and pour blessing in their place.
Yeah, no, I think that's so helpful because I think opposition and obstacles or oppositions and opportunities show up dressed up in the same outfit. And they're both there. And I love what you're both saying because I think the best way to manage our worries is to understand that whatever you feed grows, whatever you starve dies, right? Like we see the enemy in the garden in Genesis, he's a snake. In Revelations, he's a dragon. Someone's been feeding him, you know? And so whatever and that's why it's called a news feed, right? You're feeding yourself. And I'm one of those people that in the beginning of this whole thing, I was looking at the death totals every day. Like I'm waking up and the first thing I'm doing is how many people died, right? Like that is not a way to manage your worries or to feed your faith. And I love what Pastor Kevin said. He said, put down worry, right? Like we just put it down. Like you're holding on to it, put it down and pick up hope. And I think that's what you're talking about when you say speak the right things over yourself. I want to get practical for just 1 second. So how do we practically lay our fears and our worries at the feet of Jesus? How do we do that practically? Jordan, I want to start with you.
Yeah, I think that, the severity of your situation is always determined by who's in the room. Like I think of in the context of like take childbirth, like something that's a really intense event. Like if you imagine like giving birth in a car, like that sounds like the most horrible thing that's ever happened to anyone, but in the context of a hospital with doctors around and nurses, like it's the most beautiful thing. Like, so I hear, I've never tried it, but but right. Like it's supposed to be one of the most beautiful experiences ever to have, but it's all about where you're at and where it's happening and who's in the room with you.
Yes.
And I think the first thing is to recognize that Jesus is in the room with you. And maybe if you feel like he's not, maybe it's because we aren't fostering the right atmosphere for him to be in the room with you, right? Scriptures say, they communicate to us that God inhabits the praises of his people. So I would say the first way to practically lay your burdens at the feet of Jesus is get him in the room by fostering an attitude of praise because God inhabits that. And then look for those opportunities, like I was talking about, to hand those things to him. Once he's in the room, you lay your burdens at his feet, right? Yeah. And why are they at his feet? Because he wants them on the ground dying. He doesn't pick them up and put them on himself. He says those things are where they're supposed to be, on the floor.
Yeah, that's that turn your worries into worship kind of attitude.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Katy, what would you say?
So I'll go back to the word again for me because I know that the enemy tries to get in our mind and he's trying to make us waver. And so I think that it's so important in this time, in this season, to not waver. This isn't our time to start second guessing the Lord or start forgetting to pray, start missing our time with God. And so I think, again, meditating on the word in this time is so important to stir up faith, to stir up worship in us. And I love what Pastor Kevin's talking about. Again, just going back to look at the birds. And so I think for me too, it's even like get outside and change your perspective. Yeah. The Bible says that our eyes are the lamp to our body. And so I think that what we're seeing, what we're visually looking at too directs us. And so meditating on the word, directing our thoughts, changing our mind, letting it renew us. So, and then also like getting out, spending time with the Lord, meditating on the word, seeing what he sees, and seeing beyond our moment. I know for me, there's times where I literally have to physically remove myself from whatever box I feel like I'm in. So a physical move to an outside thing is actually telling me inside what I need to do, if that makes sense.
That's good,
And that's my train of thought. Sorry.
No, very helpful, very helpful. Yeah, that's a good word. And what I heard there is instead of going to Netflix, you need to go to Nehemiah. Praise God, praise God. No, but I love what Pastor Kevin said about remembering, and we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. Remembering is a key way to manage those things. And so I want to remember what God has done. I want to flip back to my journal. Man, I just did this, honestly, 2 days ago. I opened up my gratitude journal, and I was looking at some of the things that I was thankful for just to a year ago around this time, and it brought
good.
so much perspective to my life. And I'm just really, like, I'm not a big journaler, but when I go back to those things, I'm so thankful for those moments and for that time with Jesus. So let me say this. What if somebody is listening to this talk and they're saying, okay, I don't really have that much history with Jesus to remember what God has done for me. How do we help them create space in their life to remember? And I think I know what your answers are going to be, but Jordan, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, I think, like, man, how do you, if this is more new for you, like, how do you trust God, that sort of thing? That's a great question. I think the first thing to key on is intimacy. I think intimacy is the answer to the questions that most of us are asking. And it looks like, and it's a word that you hear a lot in the Christian world, but not explained a lot, I think. But intimacy is key really because, God describes this thing that we have with him as a marriage. Like he calls this relationship a marriage. And, so we're always asking these questions, how do I see this thing produced out of my life? And like in a married couple on earth, right, like when they are intimate together, something is produced out of that, a child, right? Like that's how it works. And I think like in our heavenly relationship with the Father, like when we spend intimate time with him, so much is produced out of that relationship. Like the fruits of the Spirit, like that's where those things come from. It's a natural byproduct of intimacy with the Lord. So I think even things like trust, like, well, I don't have this history. Well, if you'll learn to be intimate, that trust is naturally produced out of that place. And like, an orange tree never begged to grow oranges. It just stays intimately planted in that soil, and that's the byproduct of its existence there.
Really helpful.
So I would say for a person in that scenario, learn to practice intimacy. And that looks like your alone time with the Lord, like diving into that. It's not even necessarily like listening to a bunch of sermons or like, jamming to your Chris Tomlin CD. Like those things are great and wonderful and they develop you.
Actually,
but intimacy, elevation, come on now. But, it's those times spent with the Lord in alone time. That's the real intimate moments where things are birthed out of you.
Yeah, that's really great. Come on, Katy, what you got?
Yeah, what I'd say to someone that maybe just gave their life to Christ and they're like, I have never gone through this with Jesus. This is all new. So all these Christians that are like, have this history, or I could even, say for somebody could look at me and be like, she's young. She's been through nothing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So I just want to say that we didn't say yes to God based on our history. We said yes because the cross, and we believed in the cross and the power of the cross. And so when we're moving forward, we're pursuing Jesus, like you're creating intimacy, right? So every day you're pursuing Jesus and trusting that he's producing something in you. He's creating something in you. He's creating history with you. And so keep believing in what you said yes to. So you said yes to Jesus. Yes. Awesome. Every day is going to be a yes to him. It's just like a brand new relationship. You don't know all that there is to expect, but there's so much to know about God. There's so much to learn, and there's so much to trust in, and we can trust in the cross every single day and the victory that we have in it. But we want to, like, going off of what Jordan's saying, it really is, it's intimacy. And if you want intimacy with someone, you pursue them, so keep pursuing Jesus, and you will see him in the daily moments, freeing you from anxiety, freeing you from fear, freeing you from doubt and second guessing. And, you'll see him start healing your family. We promise that these things will happen, in your
Super
own
helpful.
life.
Thank you, Katy. Yeah, I think this question is answered in a thought that Moses gave to the Israelites. He said, store the manna that was falling from heaven in a jar for future generations. And this is why small groups and life groups are so amazing, because even when I don't have manna of my own to evaluate and to look back on, I can look on yours.
So
if you're a new believer and you get in a small group, maybe you don't have history with the Lord, but you can start to communicate and connect with the people who are in your life group, and their history, their story becomes your story. And even though you haven't seen God move in ways yet that you're expecting him to, you can look back on what other people have been through and find joy, find courage, find confidence in those things. Guys, thank you
COVID
connectivity. I love it. Hey, guys, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And Mount Hope Church, we love you so much. Hey, these questions and conversations are going to be talked about in your life groups, but please drop your comments below. We want to hear your thoughts. You have an amazing perspective. We're so thankful that you tuned into the after party. We love you so much. God bless you and have a great week.